All right, welcome everybody to the August monthly meetup for Leptos. This is going to be a pretty simple show. Hold on one second. I have an echo going on my side. There we go. My bad. Rookie mistake. So, welcome to welcome to the August meetup for the Leptos framework. So we're super stoked. It's going to be a simple show this month. It's just going to be Greg and I. Greg's going to run us through Greg's guide to testing the 0.7 beta, which is a long time coming. We're super stoked about it. So welcome, Greg. We invite everybody to ask questions in the live chat. We should be streaming out on Twitch after this. As soon as Greg takes over, I'm going to disappear off the stream and start making sure we're live on Twitch and everything. So anyways, I will hand it off to you, Greg. It looks like Ben joined us as well. So maybe Ben will be joining the stream as well. I'm not quite sure. So yeah, we'll see. But for now, I'll go ahead and hand it off to you, Greg.
Awesome. Hey, and I see in Discord we have Alex saying hi. He's on YouTube. Hi, Alex. Good to see you, and welcome to everybody else. Yeah. So I mean, I guess what I would say. Oh, first of all, hi. I'm traveling this weekend, so I'm in kind of a funny location. So you see Snoopy behind me, painting I did in elementary school, and visiting family right now. And so sorry if the sound or the lighting's a little weird, but this is going to be mostly just coding and showing off a couple things. And I have kind of two things I want to show you this month. Number one, as Luke just said, we're, the 0.7 beta release series is kind of out. I just made a new release this morning for something I'm going to show a little bit later. But yeah, basically this is a great time to start testing out 0.7. There are not big breaking changes that will be coming. Like there may well be technically breaking changes if there's some bug that requires some API to change. But basically this is what the plan is. So if you're planning on sticking with the framework and you want to try things out, this is a good time to start trying to update. It's been a pretty long alpha beta period so far. I think it'll keep going for a little longer. There are a bunch of small things just to be worked on and figured out. And most importantly, tested. Like I think one of my goals is just to let it kind of simmer for long enough that people can really test things out and see what's what. But everything's kind of there. We need to do work on, finishing off docs and things, a couple small peripheral features. But I thought today it could be cool to just walk through, okay, so you want to migrate your app from 0.6 to 0.7. You're excited. You've seen me talking about this stuff for a year. What do you do? And so I want to just walk through. We're going to open up a small, manageable kind of Leptos project, which is going to be actually the Leptos website, and just go ahead and update that from 0.6 to 0.7. I went in a couple of days ago. It hadn't been updated in nine months. It was still on like a previous Axum version and stuff. So I went and I updated it to the kind of latest 0.6, and then we'll update it today to 0.7. And then a little bit later, I just wanted to show off a demo kind of after that with our static routing feature, which has been around for like a year. But for the new release, I kind of reworked the API, made it a little bit easier to use, and added some new features around incremental static regeneration, so regenerating static pages. So I'll show off a little demo that I have put together for that. That's in the examples folder in the repository. So yeah, so let's just kick it off with updating the website. I will admit I did a test run, but this is really going to be live updating the site. It shouldn't take a super long time, maybe half an hour or something. But yeah, let's just go in and let's update the actual leptos.dev website. And I'm just going to share my whole screen here and pull things up in VS Code. So yeah, I mean, if you're going to update to the new version, the very first thing that we're going to want to do is go in and actually update the version in cargo.toml. So I'm going to open up my cargo.toml here and just put in, the 0.7 beta version. Just putting in beta here should pull in. I think we're on like beta 4 right now. This should be fine. It should pull it in and just update to the latest version. And if we need to go in and fix that, we always can. And then I've got my terminal open here. I hope this is a big enough text for people to read. Maybe I'll go a notch larger just for the screen here. All right, let's start dealing with errors. Oh, you know what? This is funny. I just cheated. I'm in my testing branch. I'm gonna go back to the main branch. All right. Discard files. Get out of here. Good. It was like, why is this building? Good. Okay. So this is currently on 0.6. So this is the main branch of the website right now. So I'm going to go in and switch this to 0.7 beta. Otherwise, that would have been a really boring stream because it would have just compiled immediately, which is not the point of what we're doing. Okay. So first thing off the bat, right, I'm going to start getting cargo errors. There are a number of places where there are features that previously existed in packages but have been removed because we don't need some of these mutually exclusive features anymore. And cargo is just going to tell us this, right? So for example, it says depends on Leptos router with feature CSR, but Leptos router doesn't have that feature. Okay, so we can go to Leptos router and oh yeah, first of all, we don't even use CSR for this site, so let's just trash that. Leptos router doesn't have a hydrate feature. Leptos meta doesn't have a hydrate feature. Same thing, I believe, with SSR, although let's see.
Hey, Greg, just really quickly, when we've got already one question, do you want to just let me know when we're at a good stopping point, and then we can break for questions? And
yeah. Let's just take a break at some point. Since I'm on the laptop, I can't actually see anything if you're sending me chat or anything. Or you can always stop me if you think it's a good point.
Okay, cool. I'll tell you what. I'll just wait till we get 2 or 3 questions backed up, and then I'll jump in at some point.
Yeah, good. Let's do that. So same thing here. Like we can just remove the islands feature on the Axum integration because it's not needed. I believe it's still needed on the main library. Leptos meta doesn't have a nightly feature. And this stuff is all, just takes a minute. It's removing features. Cool. So I think we dealt with that step, right? Things are going to start compiling now. We're going to compile some dependencies. So you may know already, one of the big changes is deprecating, kind of changing how we're naming some things. Oh, good. We got lots of nice errors here. So I'm gonna go in just initially, and we're changing a lot of the style of things to replace functions like create signal with just signal. Create RW signal is like RW signal new. Create memo is memo new. These are all normal Rust patterns. Create signal is an interesting one because it returns a tuple. And we actually have an example of things like channel in Rust that return tuples. So we just made signal. The other big one is going to be use Leptos glob import. That's all going to be coming from a prelude now. A lot of people don't like preludes. They're useful for some things, but moving things into that prelude where they're re-exported is really helpful as far as making the docs a little bit cleaner. So we moved that. You can see that's sort of a bulk import that's done. Now, there is some boilerplate that has changed, which I'm honestly just going to go ahead and copy and paste out of another example. And I would recommend you do this too. Things like the shell function for creating an app shell. This is just part of, we've pulled some things that were hard coded into the server integrations out into their own user space code that you write and you control. So I'm going to take that shell and just put it right in my app function here. And then there are a few things that we actually provided directly in the integration, and which I don't actually need to provide myself anymore. So the static file server fallback, this website is actually not using the error handling stuff that we had. So some of this boilerplate that's in a lot of examples and is in the website, we actually just don't need. So if I go into main.rs, I'm going to, again, just basically take this from another example. But what we're going to do is where we generate the route list, we're going to still generate the route list. This actually can just remain unchanged. And then where we do Leptos routes, if you see this app, we've created this new shell function. And the idea of having shell defined out here is that this lets you edit anything that was previously hard-coded as far as the not interactive server rendered shell around your app. So your app component, right, lives here in the body. When we hydrate it, we're going to hydrate, just that body part. But when we server render it, we want to make sure we provide the shell and not just that app, which doesn't have the boilerplate anymore. So to do that, really simple. This is the new Leptos routes. We just feed it the shell instead of the app that takes our Leptos options. And then for the fallback, I ripped out that file and error handler, that static file server part. And we actually just provide that directly in the integration now. So again, like what I'm copying and pasting over here, this is in the start Axum 0.7 repository. It's in all the examples that use Axum. We've basically moved a lot of the boilerplate out into your code. And the reason to do that is that it then lets us remove or just simplify or rationalize some of this stuff. So for example, I've got an HTML component here that sets the lang to en. We actually don't need that, right? Because we can just have it in our shell. I've got a style sheet tag here, ID equals Leptos, package / Leptos website. We don't need that. That's not something that like changes over the course of the site. We can just put, link rel equals style sheet, ID equals Leptos. That ID is used for the hot reload. Do I not have one? Oh, I don't have a style sheet in here. What's the full URL? Let's just copy and paste it. So because these things are like rendered once in the root of the page and don't change, even the title we might be able to, we'll just leave the title. You can still use the Leptos meta tags. Again, like this meta component, we can just put in the head. There's no reason not to here. So you have full control over what's in here. One of the kind of reasons that the Leptos meta package existed in the first place was because you didn't. The other reason to use the Leptos meta components with the capital letters here, right, is if you have things that are going to like change programmatically, then obviously you want to use that still. But you can use a mix of them as well. Wherever we put this meta tags in the shell is where Leptos meta is going to insert any of those components that you use during server rendering. And likewise, you'll see a couple other things here. This auto reload, right? This is something that when we publish it, we can just remove. That inserts the cargo Leptos watch code. And these hydration scripts, we're actually using islands in this example. So in hydration scripts, I'm going to add islands equals true, which tells it basically what we're doing is hydrating islands, not hydrating the whole app. And then over in the lib.rs, which loads our hydration code, this just becomes Leptos mount hydrate islands. And that's how we hydrate our islands. And I think that actually most of these errors, these are files I deleted. We don't actually need config if here. We'll maybe just say config feature equals hydrate on the hydrate function. And we've got a little syntax error. Good. One of the things I love about having Rust format set up to format on save is I know when I've already fixed all my syntax errors because everything snaps into the right location. All right, so next set of errors here, this really just has to do with where we're importing this from, right? And here you get a good example of where Rust Analyzer will just tell you what to do. So we have this Leptos router glob import. These imports have moved around a little bit, but Rust Analyzer actually tells us use Leptos router components router. So fine. And it's the same for these other ones. So we can just import these. I don't know why that's doing that. Great. Okay, so now we get this error about possible route matches. Well, if you look in some of the migration stuff, we actually have a different format for how paths work now. Rather than using a string, which we have to parse at runtime, we use kind of a tuple that shows the different segments. So this is something like static segment this. But if you don't want to deal with parsing that yourself, there's a path macro, and it will parse it for you. So basically anything that would previously be, see what the other error is in a second. Path equals this becomes path equals path this. I don't know what Rust Analyzer is telling me about. Let's see if we can fix that. Oh, good. And then it's missing it says missing required field fallback on routes. You're just required to provide a fallback. And for now, we'll just stick this in here. So in other words, if the routes can't match a route, it'll show this fallback as a sort of 404. And I guess with SSR mode, we just need to import that too, since we took out that glob import. All right, before we move on, should I pause there for a second and you can read me some of those questions?
Yeah, it looks like, well, Alex asked this question, but I think it was already answered, but I'll ask it anyways.
Great.
So in 0.7.0 beta, we'll pull in the most recent beta. I have mine set to 0.7.0 beta 2. Should that be switched to 0.7.0 beta?
Yeah. Well, let's actually take a look. So, right. So I at least have tried to build this. It probably won't show it compiling any dependencies, but if I open the cargo lock, and let's see, 0.7.0 beta. Yeah, so it pulls in beta 4. So the way that this works in cargo, which is funny, kind of nifty. I don't know the formal rules for it, right? But it seems to be the case that with pre-releases, which is anything that starts with a dash and then letters, so like alpha, beta, it actually goes in alphabetical order. So there have been a couple times where I initially released one that was dash preview, and it was pulling that in as the latest version and causing build issues because P comes after B. But so dash beta will pull in beta 4. And if I keep releasing things that are dash beta 4, 5, 6, and you just run a cargo update, it will pull in the latest one. And if you need to, generally I'll release one of these beta releases every couple weeks, and just tracking git main is also a good way to get the latest things. Now that it is the main branch, we do have CI running before any of the PRs, so it shouldn't break stuff too badly if you're just tracking the git main branch. But
okay, cool.
Works.
Okay, sweet. All right, Alex also asks, I assume the auto reload scripts should somehow get automatically disabled on release?
That's actually a great question. That's the sort of thing that it would make sense to assume, but I don't know if it's actually set up to do that. Let's see if it is. So yeah. So if you look at the auto reload script, the actual code for this component, and that's the nice thing too about making it a component, right? Is like I just command clicked, went to definition, and it showed me the actual code in a component that you can read rather than being in some deep within the integration. It was like a string format thing. Okay, so if we say not disable watch, so disable watch just turns off the watching part as a prop, but then and standard and var Leptos watch is okay. So I believe that if this is not provided, this won't be injected at all. Somebody can correct me. This may or may not be true, but I'm pretty sure that the way that this is written, if you're not running it with cargo Leptos, or you're not providing that Leptos watch end variable, it will not insert this code at all. This will just be none with which, because it's, if that's true, then. So this is none if those conditions aren't true, which means it will just insert nothing into the head. Somebody double check me on whether that's true or not, but that's how it's supposed to work. So it should be safe to leave this in other words, for release, because it will detect, unless you're running with cargo Leptos watch in release, which you shouldn't do.
All right, and then one more, and then we can continue. Cool. So Alex asks again, are optional statements possible, like the old syntax's country abbreviation yet? Or have optional segments in paths not been implemented into 0.7?
Oh, yeah. So you're saying for route definitions, right? Like optional params. I just slash, blog slash post or whatever it was. This is just not implemented yet. it's on my radar for something we need to do, and that is missing relative to 0.6. It's the way that the params are parsed now. It's slightly trickier to do this. I think it should be pretty straightforward to figure it out. I just haven't sat down and done it yet. But yeah, that is on my radar.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Alex says, yeah, meant optional pass segments. Wrote
Yep.
that weird. Okay, cool.
Great.
Awesome. Then I think we're good to go. We can continue.
Cool, good. All right, so let's see where we are now on my zoomed in text here. So that's actually pretty good. I see like 4 pages that have errors. Let's just go through and tackle those, but most of this is in pretty good shape, I think. And we have whole files, right, where, yeah, that just still works. You know, that there aren't huge changes to the basics here. So let's see if I go into this code examples. Okay, so this is a good example of like, we probably should be providing a create resource function that's deprecated that we've just forgotten to do so far. But this is really easily replaced with just resource new. And this is for loading a code example, which we show on the page. And so I'm gonna have to fix some other things in here too. Good, so that one's gonna be a little harder. So let's go to another error. We'll come back to that one. Okay, so action form. This is a great example. Action form has just moved into a Leptos directly. I don't know if it's even form as a public module, but if we just delete this and we let Rust Analyzer try to help us, Rust Analyzer will fail. That's fine. Oh no, because did I already import it? Did it come in the prelude? Yeah, look at that. It came in the prelude. So all that I did to fix that error was just delete the Leptos router import. So action form doesn't actually depend on the router itself anymore. It comes in the core package. And then for a server action, this is another one where we're just going to change from create something to something new. And otherwise, everything in this one, I think, is the same. Yeah, great. Okay, so this page is good. And none of these have been hopefully too hard so far in your actual applications. I'm sure there will be examples that are bigger lifts to change and fix. Let's check out the header here. That's an unused import. Oh, okay. So again, this is just a fixing an import. So this is saying it can't find the A component, and it tells us maybe, do you mean Leptos router components A? And the answer is yes, that's exactly what we mean. And so we got the used Leptos router glob import warning, and then it couldn't find this. So that was where it's coming from. This page is good. All right, and then these are the sort of 2 sets of things left that I think are a little more interesting to look at and talk about. So first of all, there's a huge one here, which is annoying, and I'm not sure it's worth putting that much time into fixing. So if we look at like another example page, if I just like copy some of this beautiful Tailwind stuff here, I should probably put the view macro in. And to close these tags out, div. Okay, so this is one of the big changes in 0.7, right? Is that we have a statically typed view tree. So this view has a type, and in 0.6, that would be like let view equals view, and view was an enumerated type of all the different possible things that a view could be. And now it has this long type signature, which encodes in it things like what the actual HTML elements are, the fact that it's adding a class to the first one, and then it's adding a class to the second one, and then a div with a class, and a div with a class, and then something that's impl into view, right, which is the A tag, right? And it does this. There are a couple of reasons, mostly binary size reasons, also performance reasons that we do this, and it really makes the implementation of the internals a lot neater by not having to deal with the fact that it's an enumerated type that could branch into any one of 6 things. But one of the side effects of that is you notice this whole big view macro returns ultimately. Let's see, the child this is actually probably a bad example. Let's take two children. Let's make it two divs that are siblings. So now I've got a div and it has a neighbor who's a div. This is actually going to be a tuple of a div and another div. And that means that like the children are not passed as, again, like vec view, which involves a lot of allocations because view has an RC in it and a vec is allocating a bunch of stuff. And not only are those allocations at runtime, but they take away a lot of information that the compiler can use to do some pretty smart optimizations. So we use a tuple instead. But implementing a trait on a tuple, you have to actually give it a certain number of items to implement that trait on. Okay, so all of which is to say, we've implemented the sort of add some children trait for up to 26 things because there are 26 letters in the alphabet and I used 26 generics. And it's a macro that expands that up to 26 things. But when you have something like this, where we've actually expanded some markdown in order to add interactivity, and so there are like 100 something different children on this element, I guess we could add implementations for up to 100 item tuples. Or there are other things you can do. You know, for now, for this one, I'm actually just going to take this and split it up into a couple different view macros. So if you ever run into an issue where you have a huge number of elements and it won't let you, you know, put them all as children of something, sorry, I guess we can fix it. It's sort of a result of not having variadic generics in Rust, which are sort of one of those wish list items. But so I'm just going to actually split this out for now into a couple of different view macros so that we can actually publish this thing without me having to fix another issue there. I think the number of times in real life in which you have like 100 different children of an element is relatively unusual. Maybe 26 is a little bit lower than it should be. I don't know, but you all can let me know. We do have an open issue about route definitions only allowing, I think it's up to 16 or something right now, which is probably too low. You know, that's a reasonable thing to have an issue about. One of these may be too long still. You can see my excellent method of like guess-based debugging here. Which one is causing us the problem? Is it none of them? Is it the first one? Okay, so I think I had one or two too many in the first one that we'll just move down to the second one. And maybe this is a good example of maybe this actually is kind of a problem we need to fix, but let's see if I just delete some of these from the first one, whether it fixes it for us. Okay, so maybe I will go and fix that one off screen for us at some point because it seems a little silly to sit here while I fiddle with which elements are in which child. But give it one last crack and see. That may have been good. Okay. Anyway, so then the last one that we have in here is at least interesting to talk about. Cool. Okay, so we've got two things we can change in here. One is in this suspense block. So this is, I don't think we really need to know too much about what's going on in this component quite yet. You notice there's a suspense here. So we're loading something that we're doing asynchronously, which is this code resource, a resource that's going to presumably load some code for us. So it's got a suspense. And we've got this and then, which it says doesn't exist anymore. I thought there was a PR that just added this. Maybe I haven't actually merged it yet, and that's fine. So and then will come back, but we might as well just use this as an example to look at a different way of doing suspense. So let me copy this. We can actually use real async await stuff, which I have said before with suspense now. So we can do something like let code view equals suspend new async move. So we can actually await this, await a resource directly, and it will return to us the correct. Why is that type wrong? I don't know. It will wait until the resource actually loads and then give us what we want from it, which is the data that it was loading. So rather than that sort of and then mapping over, waiting for it to be ready, I guess this is going to be a resource. So let's just stick this code view in here since I defined it like that. And let's just call it .unwrap or default. I don't think we actually handle this error, but I don't think it ever actually happens. We're just putting a string directly in here. Why is code resource? Oh, because this is all messed up. That's fine. So let's go in here. Yeah, good. So part of the reason for this is that resource is actually changed in its type. So the second type is now this serialization type, and the first generic type just is the actual type of the resource, and this will default to JSON. So what I want to do here is actually just take out this bool. Where that was coming from is the first argument to the resource, this one. And we're able now to just take that out of resources entirely. So it makes the type signature for a resource that you're passing around simpler, basically. We just removed this generic. And that should fix our other weird error we were having down here too. Yeah, so now the code here is a string. Code resource.await returns us an actual result. And then I just unwrap, if it's an error, we're just going to eat it and give nothing. We can deal with that another time. And then we just put the code view right in here, and that should be fine. And then this here, right, is a good example of this view that used to be an enumerated type is not anymore. There is still a type erased type that we can use, which is any view, which is generic over the renderer, which is DOM. I'm just going to use that for now. We can always go back and think about, do we want to make code example mode generic or something? What do we want to do? We don't have to. That's not clonable, but that's fine. We can take off that bound. And then in here, these into views are going to become into any. This is two different branches where we're returning different things. And the way to sort of erase that type in 0.7 is just to say into any. Or we could do the either left and either right. But I think because we are actually storing it, does that compile? That might be nice. Cool. I have to import this. So basically using either here avoids the boxing, avoids the type erasure, a little bit smaller binary size, a little bit faster, slightly more verbose. Once it gets above 2 or 3 enum branches, maybe you just want to do into any because it's rather than like we do have either of 2, either of 3, either of 3, either of 4, all the way up to 16. But maybe you just want to do into any at that point because it sort of makes a little more sense. All right, and now back to our home page. It looks like we maybe have one more error. Great, and it's this. This needs to be into any as well because this view now takes any view. And I think that should be good. So I think that is the website updated. I do want to, where is the benchmark? I think it's time to remove the benchmark from the front page. The JS framework benchmark, I'm sorry to say, has outlived its usefulness. So let's see if we can just run this. and if the website works. And remember, this is with islands, and this is using async rendering. There's no streaming or anything, but we should be able to just check it out locally once it builds. I think it's going to be on port 3000. Great. Okay, so we've got a couple things in main.rs I hadn't seen yet. And so let's get those fixed, and then we should be good to go. And can I get the terminal? Good. All right, so let's get rid of this fallback that we're not importing. Get configuration, after many people bugging me about it for a long time, is not async, so we can just take off the await. Oh, and this is just, let's just change that to a print line. That was logging log because we're not importing it from Leptos anymore. Okay. And it already built the WASM, so now it's just rebuilding the server, and it's just rebuilding our crate. Yay! Hey, and there's our new website. Okay. So, oh, I guess high performance now just says nothing, which is embarrassing. Maybe I'll put the benchmark back for now. Fine. Our island works. The little interactive demo works. Great. Let's see if the server function works. Favorite type of cookie, chocolate chip. Favorite color, blue. Here, have some blue chocolate chip cookies. Great. All right. So that's our website updated to 0.7. Granted, this is like a silly little, it's not, this is not a complicated web app. Most of you are hopefully building stuff that's a lot more interesting than this. But yeah, that's our website. And those are sort of all the steps for updating to 0.7. And I'm just going to push that straight to main. And if it builds there, it will deploy. So yeah, I'm gonna take my screen off for a second and just see, are there any other questions people have or anything else that's come up?
Yeah. If we could back up to our last, so I missed, Alex had a follow-up question.
Great.
And I think I missed it. But so if we could pick up kind of where we left off last time. So yes, I guess a reasonable solution is to dupe the paths a few times for all optional segments. And this, just a refresher, was in reference to this first question, which was and also this is for people who weren't here earlier, are optional statements possible, like the old syntaxes, country abbreviation yet, or have optional segments? Actually, I think even segments imp has not been implemented in 0.7 yet. So the follow-up question you had was, the reasonable solution is just to dupe the paths a few times.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're just like trying to update and ship something, yeah, I mean, because right, if you have basically one optional segment, you can create the same route twice, once with it, once without it. If you have three, it's not exactly like a combinatoric problem, I don't think, because you can either have 0, 1, 2, or 3 of those present, and you know which one it's supposed to be if you have none of them, if you have one of them, if you have 2, if you have 3. So I think that the number of different route definitions you need in that case is just however many optional segments in a row there are. Like, obviously, it's much more convenient just to say this is an optional route segment, and like I will get that added at some point. But for now, yeah, I think you should be able to just go in and put duplicates. And particularly if you're using islands like you are, and it's going to be going back to the server to fetch those pages, I don't think there's any downside. I think if you're doing it on the client, then it would be like if you navigated between 2 of those, it might re-render more of the page than it should. So like optional segments are good, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't worry too much about it. You should be able to define the same thing in terms of just non-optional segments, if that makes sense. And that's actually what the router does, right? So what the router currently does, because like Axum, for example, doesn't, I don't think, or Actix, at least one of them doesn't support optional segments for params. So we actually expand those out already in like 0.6 in the router. It expands optional params into all the different combinations. and just does it automatically. So you can do the same process manually for now.
Okay, cool. Dare I pronounce this? This name, Ifiok Jr. Asks, when fixing the number of elements, would it have worked to break them into fragments?
That's a great idea. So just so I'm not just staring into your faces, I'm gonna go back to sharing just my VS Code here, so it doesn't get into our infinite loop of faces. All right. You're saying right here, would it work if we just, does this work? I never use fragments, I will admit. Can you use fragments just in the middle of another element? I'm using VS Code today, but I keep trying to do Vim key bindings. So sorry. When you see me like trying to type :W key on things. Does that work? Either Rust Analyzer hasn't caught up, or yeah, that works, which is actually a lot cleaner, obviously. And I will say there is no overhead at all to doing a fragment here. The fragment in 0.7 expands to a tuple, which is exactly the same thing as breaking it out into those views. So as a workaround, like 0.1 to 0.6, the fragment will create a vec. I guess just doing children does that too. So there's no difference to the fragment version in any of the versions. Oh, wow. Sweet. Yep.
Did it work?
Yep. You nailed it. Thank you. Good tip.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Did I set those fireworks off?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, but that was so appropriate. Yeah. That's so cool.
Okay, so awesome tip. Yep, you can just use fragments inline like that. Very cool. Didn't know that worked. Awesome. Love it.
All right. Okay, Alex asks, does into any allow any number of children?
So into any, the way that you can do into any on one renderable thing, but like a tuple is a renderable thing, right? So like parentheses ABC parentheses dot into any, yes, works. It will take whatever you give it, basically anything that impulse into view, you can dot into any, and it's good to go. So I think the answer is basically yes. It allows any number of children. It doesn't have to be, it's not just one HTML element. It's into any is the new into view. And the old into any that just worked on HTML elements doesn't exist anymore. And so it can be any view. It doesn't have to just be one element.
All right. Also, Alex asks, if I converted everything using into any, does that erase all binary size performance benefits of 0.7?
No, you mean like everything that instead of using either ever, right? Because the thing is, I know that I one of the things I do when we stream is I keep toggling back and forth with showing my screen and not. So sorry, but like you're presumably not actually using it on everything, right? Like if you have a page like this, like you're not going in here and you're like, all right, I'm the man. Let's go. Let's into any everything. Like in the middle of your tree of HTML, right? You're not like literally calling into any on everything. And so, but say you had something here that was like an if statement and you just threw into any on that. Well, yeah, then you still have static typing on all of this stuff. You're still getting all the benefits on all of that stuff that's not in the conditional. It's just wherever you use it, there may or may not be a small benefit to the into any. And it's entirely possible in a large enough application, right, that actually using into any in more places is useful, because it's that kind of trade-off you always get with Rust between like box, dyn, some trait versus a generic. Sometimes using the generic means, and what I've found with the 0.7 stuff is using generics for small functions means the compiler can inline a lot of stuff and then optimize away a lot of stuff that it doesn't know it can optimize away if you box it as a trait object, because it needs to provide all those methods. But it may be the case in some cases that the into any actually helps. And we're kind of looking into stuff with the router right now, because people have raised a couple of odd edge cases where the binary size actually gets bigger. I think what we've seen in general with the binary size is that it got smaller in 0.7. And I should actually see, I meant to check the current binary size on the actual website with the islands just to see what the change is. And I hope it didn't build and replace it already before we checked on that. But we've seen about a 20 or 30% reduction in binary size most of the time. But there are a few weird edge cases people have brought up where I wonder if actually using the into any for type erasure stuff might help. So no, I mean, it's fine. You're still getting all the benefits. It's all upside. If you update and every conditional you have, you use into any, currently it essentially uses into any on everything. And now you're taking all the stuff that's just in the view macro has a static type. So you're going to get some benefit, presumably, even if you just do into any and you never do either. So you're fine.
Okay, cool. All right. I nailed the pronunciation. Awesome.
Sick.
That was my one accomplishment.
And that was a great tip, by the way. Huge shout out. You like when you tell me something I didn't know that the framework can do. That's good work.
That's cool. All right. Okay, so we're into like, yeah. So we've got we've got a couple of questions. One question rolling in off Twitch, but these are not really. This isn't really 0.7 related.
That's fine.
So,
that's great. Let's do it. Let's do some random questions, and then I'll go and do my other little demo.
Okay, cool. Well, random question, which is the most important question, is thoughts on NeoVim versus VS Code versus Zed.
Oh, great question. Use what you enjoy using and what that helps you do things. I'm using VS Code today. I think my theme in Vim is a little bit low contrast for people to see on stream. And also I think a lot of people are more familiar with VS Code. And for something like this, it's my VS Code setup is a little more helpful to have, like our errors over here and just to pop between stuff. I like Vim. I don't find that speed of editing text is the limiting factor in my work. So like, in other words, I'm not just like trying to churn stuff out. I spend a lot more time not typing than I do typing. So the choice of editor doesn't make a huge difference for me. I've kind of switched over to NeoVim. I haven't used Zed. I found I started using NeoVim more when I was working on some really big projects, and VS Code, even though most of the work was Rust Analyzer, VS Code felt noticeably slower to me when editing stuff. But VS Code has some nice stuff that I miss too. And do your thing. It's whatever. It's just a tool.
Yeah. I've used all three. I haven't used that heavily. I've played with it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my thing is, how are you supposed to brag about using NeoVim if you don't use NeoVim? You know what I mean? Like, that's a real conundrum.
Yeah, and that is the real issue. And then you just have to say, you use Leptos, by the way, and not worry about the editor. But
yeah, exactly.
It's pretty funny, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some of the I really enjoy Ryan Carniato's streams, creator of Solid.js, been a developer for, professionally 20 plus years, overall 30 years, super smart guy. I've never seen anybody worse at using like an editor. And it's really funny. Like, he'll be on stream and he's like using VS Code and he's like kind of poking around, and then he'll be like, try to use npm to update something. And he's like 4 versions behind, right? It's like, ultimately, you use the tools you have to do what you need to do. And when you get more focused on the tools than on what you're doing, it's like maybe, I don't know, maybe, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like, it's just something to use. The whole like editor as identity, even language as identity. Like I love Rust, right? But people, whatever. It's great. But no, I have no strong preferences here.
I mean, you're not truly a developer until you actually abandon QWERTY and learn Dvorak anyways. So
yeah, right. No, here I am just typing away. There was a while where my E key was broken, so I'd be trying to like type stuff on my laptop keyboard. It wasn't really working. We all make it through.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's see. So, Josh asked, what is recommended path for a WebGL 3D canvas in Leptos? I experimented with Bevy using WebGPU, but its easiest programming model is quite alien to Leptos signal-based programming model. That's actually an interesting question.
That's a super interesting question. I don't think I have anything for you. I know I've seen some people experimenting with things like using Bevy with Leptos signals. I know there's somebody posting in Discord about that. There was somebody working on kind of a custom renderer with 0.7, which has a renderer trait, so you can kind of they were using it to like drive some Bevy stuff. I don't know. I've done nothing at all with 3D graphics in my life, so I'm probably the worst person in the community to ask. There may be people who have better answers. And if you're not in Discord, a lot of people are very active on the Discord. We have like 4,000 users, so come in and ask, and maybe somebody will have an answer for you too.
Yeah, you might. I'm going to post Chris Biscardi's channel into the chat. I would check. I'll check his channel because he does a lot of like. I think we even demoed this like a couple streams ago, like his This Week in Bevy. I guess like blog that he has going on. He does a lot of Bevy content, and he also does a lot of Leptos.
Yeah.
So if anybody would know the answer to that question, it would be Chris Biscardi.
And he is giving a talk in a couple of weeks at RustConf, where I know at least Ben and I will also be at RustConf just hanging out. And if anyone else is there, come and find us and say hi. But he's doing a talk in a couple of weeks on Rust and WebAssembly for web apps. And I assume he's talking about some Leptos stuff and some Bevy stuff. So who knows? But I don't know if he's integrated those things at all, or if they're just two separate things that he's worked with. But
yeah. Let's see. More Zed, VS Code, NeoVim discussion.
This must have been once we added Twitch.
It was our first Twitch comment.
The first Twitch comment is better. It's good.
Yeah, totally. I knew something like that was going to happen when he streamed out to Twitch. Yeah. If Yak says it's the hipster stack, Rust, Leptos, and NeoVim.
Yeah. Right. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Let's see. An out of context question. Steven asks, will it be useful to talk about useful builder patterns using Leptos to dome spa and complex web apps?
That is out of context to the point that I'm not entirely sure what you're asking about as far as useful builder patterns, whether you mean like the builder pattern in the sense of
okay, Alex, I'm gonna put a comment that Alex put up on the stream.
Okay.
So builder pattern usually refers to this style of syntax.
Yeah. So the phrase builder pattern to me evokes like the builder pattern, but maybe you mean something else. So feel free to leave another comment and we'll come back to it if you have a different question from that.
Okay, cool. Josh asks, any plans for Leptos integration sample with Loco framework, Axum with batteries included?
That's a great idea. I haven't worked with Loco at all. If Loco itself is an Axum backend style framework, I could definitely see how it would integrate pretty easily. And that may be a question of like you said, an example more than additional work. But I haven't touched it at all. it's probably not something that I'll have time to get to, but if anyone's listening and wants to work on putting something together, I'm sure that'd be great. And that's the sort of thing we would love to have as an example in the repository or as a starter template, like start loco, right? Because often things like that, it's a question of like getting the right boilerplate set up for things to just be wired together properly. I don't know if they have their own CLI tool, how that would play with Cargo Leptos. Those would be sort of the biggest questions, like, because our big thing is having to build the WebAssembly bundle binary and the native binary. So they may have their own CLI tool that wants to be in charge of the build process, just like we do, in which case the question is, can that tool call out to WASMPack for you or something? We don't require you to use Cargo Leptos at all, but it just runs the two separate builds. So if theirs has a way you can hook into what they're doing and also run that, I don't see any reason you wouldn't be able to do it. I just haven't seen anyone do an example.
Yeah, and I'm putting up a comment that Ben responded to that a couple of people asked about it. The answer is probably no, but we're happy to support someone who wants to try. Imagine the Axum integration is almost compatible. So
Sweet.
I think that pretty much falls in line. Rusty Rob asks, is there any low-hanging fruit for GitHub contributions?
Ooh, good question. I think that low-hanging fruit for us is often pretty limited. We do have a good first issue label, but I'm just scrolling through the events issues off screen. There's one from February nobody's touched, but otherwise there's not a ton. I think really good ways of contributing are contributing to the ecosystem, particularly Leptos Use is a great place for contributions because it's just a collection of useful primitives. And so it's really easy to make a one-off contribution of, oh, cool, you were looking for an implementation of this thing. Here you go. Whereas like the issues and stuff that tend to be in the framework itself tend not to be very low-hanging fruit because they are it tends to require a lot more big picture knowledge, whereas contributing to ecosystem library stuff, it's easier to get into. So that's what I would say for low-hanging fruit is like helping people in the Discord help channel and in GitHub discussions is a huge and really helpful contribution that I appreciate whenever people get involved in that. And things like Leptos Use or other ecosystem libraries, just contributing stuff that they need is really helpful.
All right, perfect. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. This person, Veer Pratap, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. He typed his question out over 2 comments, so I'm going to read them both and then I'll try to sum it up. Can you tell me more of the server-side coding for Leptos, best way to practice and learn about it? So I think this question more just broadly asks if you wanted to practice and if you wanted to learn about writing server-side code using Leptos, do you have any sort of recommendations? I guess this would apply to, I don't know, a mental model or building demo apps. I don't know. How would you go about kind of learning?
Yeah. Well, so this actually could be, do we have more questions before I move to the other demo? Because this could be really pretty well answered through looking at the other demo that I had actually. So
we have one more, but I think Ben pretty much already answered it. But basically, if you ask any news on when crates like Leptos using Leptos Query will integrate into the 0.7.0 beta, to which Ben already responded. We don't know about Leptos Query, but I believe Leptos Use is a branch that supports 0.7 currently. So I don't know. Was there anything else you wanted to add on to that?
No, that's all I have to say about that. I think that's true. I guess what I would say is I know a number of the libraries have branches. I think the hard thing in an open source ecosystem is always when somebody creates an awesome library, and this isn't toward any specific library, but I think is like a general thing that we've seen the pattern. When someone creates an awesome library that other people want to use, that they then don't have time to maintain anymore, and then updates happen and it's sort of left behind and then they aren't updating it. And that can be a tricky thing to manage because we don't want to pull in every system thing being maintained by core people, but we also want people to be able to keep using stuff. So it is a hard balance. And that's part of the reason to just have like a long beta period, is not to say, okay, this is done, release it. And then like, it's been really useful as people have tested Leptos use, for example, which definitely I think has a working 0.7 branch. They have turned up bugs or API holes or things that I need to do differently. So it's been really good to just have this long testing period. And likewise, as people build their actual applications. So go ahead, like it's really helpful for me when people try to port something from 0.6 to 0.7 that they've created, or try to build something new in 0.7 and then tell me the things that are broken so that we can fix them before release. Because if we don't discover bugs until after release that then require some breaking changes, then we have to like be releasing 0.8, and then the whole ecosystem has to upgrade to 0.8 again, right? So like having a long beta, updating stuff is good. And also, you know, sometimes when there are libraries that haven't updated, sometimes if you want to use them, you do just need to make a private fork and then make a PR to them so that that maintainer can update it. Because, you know, every single person involved in this is just doing stuff in their free time, right? So including especially all of the ecosystem libraries. So yeah, sometimes it is a matter of getting your hands dirty a bit yourself. But yeah. All right, so I want to answer that question about server-side coding, and I want to do it in part by showing this other demo that I had. So if anyone, you know, needs a stretch break, get yourself a drink, whatever, that's fine. I'm going to get myself set up on a different screen over here. VS Code, open this in a different window. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to get rid of this window, and I'm going to go to my other window here and just walk through a demo. So the idea of this, if you are using, well, actually, no. Okay, so I was going to say if you're using client-side routing, or if you're just using, client-side rendering, or if you're just using, you know, like the single-page app client-side model, right? I was going to say, oh, sorry, you know, this isn't going to help you. Actually, it does, is the cool thing. So this static routing feature was contributed like a year ago, and it was something that the original contributor built, and it had to kind of be bolted on so that we didn't break other parts of the framework. But now that we can break anything because we have a release, I took the chance to kind of look back into it, rewrite some things a little bit. But basically, the idea here, right, is that any web page has pages, content that can be generated at different times. So sometimes your content is super interactive. It's like your user is editing a form and you have real interactivity, even real-time interactivity as they type. And that's the kind of, whether you're using islands to do that, or you've got a fully hydrated page and that's just signals doing stuff that are reactive, you know, that's like the fully interactive side of things. Then there's the request response side of things, where user makes a request for the page. You need to go to the database, you need to fetch the data, you need to return that page then, because maybe it's something like, comments on a tweet or whatever, right? You need the data that's coming right then, and maybe you have some kind of caching layer, but whenever the request comes in, you're generating that per request. But then there's stuff like the homepage, or like a blog post, like a blog index page that only gets updated every time you publish a new blog post. And so everybody can be served the same HTML. Whenever they go to that index page, you don't need to hit your database every single time anyone loads your homepage to see what posts you have. That's only going to update whenever you publish a new post. And hopefully you have users coming to your page more often than you're posting blog posts. Otherwise, that's just sad. And then you have things like the homepage, that your about page, your contact page, that, you know, you're just going to recompile your server when those things are updated. They don't change. They don't read any data. They don't respond to anything. And so that's the sort of spectrum of applications. If you're doing a server-side server-side rendered application, right, you can do any of those. If you're doing a client-side rendered application, you can either do super interactive, or you can do static pages that are pre-rendered to HTML that then have interactivity, right? And so this static routing feature is designed for both of those situations. It can work on the server, it can work actually as a standalone static site generation kind of tool. So in other words, you can generate in the target directory a bunch of HTML pages that you can deploy to like a static host like GitHub Pages, or you can be running an Axum server in the background. So I want to walk through this example. And the reason I want to do it in response to this question also was just that it shows kind of how you're going to use server-side code in a Leptos application, which was kind of the question, right? So this is really simple. I'm actually just going to take away this sidebar because it's all in the single app file. You see the same shell that we had before. It's just doing its thing. Our app component here has, this is for dark mode, has a router, a simple nav thing, and then it has a blog page with a home page and an about page that just has a redirect and a page for a post. So it's really simple. There's just, a home page that shows a list of blog posts and then a post page that shows the actual post. You notice the SSR mode here, right? SSR mode is in enumerated type, and traditionally we've had out of order, partially blocked, in order, and async. Out of order, in order, async are the main ones. Out of order meaning it's going to stream these suspense chunks in whenever. In order, it streams top to bottom. Async, it waits for all your suspense data to load and then renders it. When I was thinking about kind of how the API for this should work for static routing really is just like another routing mode. It doesn't make any sense to say, oh, I want this page to be, before we had like a static mode prop, right? It doesn't make any sense to say SSR should be SSR mode out of order, and I want it statically rendered, right? If it's statically rendered, meaning you're going to build it at build time, or you're going to build it once and then rebuild it, like streaming makes no sense. You're not streaming in a loading placeholder and then something else. So it really just is another SSR mode. And that let us make what I think is a pretty nice API. So let's ignore this in a regeneration for now. This is just going to be SSR mode, static route, new. So this just tells it, hey, I want to use static routing for this page. And if I go to the home page, what that does is lists the posts. Here, this is just the old suspense style because I'm using it in a for loop. So it's going to list the posts, and it's going to just render a list of the posts. And the list post function is where you see some of that working with the server. So list posts is a server function. This is where we put, server side code. And in here, you can do anything. So here I'm using Tokyo. I'm using a reader stream, which lets us convert the list of files in the directory into a stream. And we basically, this is just some code that's like iterating over all the files in a posts directory and mapping over them, seeing if they end with .md, reading them asynchronously. This is using Tokyo to read the file. And then I just did a pretend markdown parser. It doesn't even really do anything. And I guess I could show, I don't need to really show, if you just ran this right with SSR mode async, whenever it requested this page, it would call list posts. It would read those files. It would wait for that to happen. And then it would render the list of them with the names, right? What we do when we switch that from SSR mode async to SSR mode static, if I go in here and I build this, and I hope I've built this recently enough that it's not going to take forever, but it probably is. Good. Yeah, okay, well, it's going to take a little while to rebuild, that's fine. But during the actual build process, we're going to have this additional call when the server starts up to static routes generate, and we're going to await that. And that means as part of the process of the server actually starting up, it's going to build certain routes for us. And then when somebody visits that page, it's not going to read from the file system again. It's just going to serve that static page. And you can think of good reasons for that, right? Like I said, with a blog, you don't need to hit your database, or you don't need to go through the file system every single time somebody requests the front page of a blog. You can just serve them the static HTML page. Good. So it's served now, right? It says calling list posts once, right? That was in that server function. And if we go to target site, it actually has an index.html now that it's generated, which has in it my blog, and it has my blog posts. And these blog posts are exactly the blog posts that I defined in a posts file here, post1234.markdown. And if we go, I guess I'm not sharing my browser right now. So maybe I will switch to sharing the browser, or just share my whole screen. Give us an infinite loop for a second. Where is it being served? 3007. Okay, so if I go in here, right, this is just the page with the list of different posts, and I can go to the different posts, and it's all good. It's all cool, right? But if I refresh this page, right, multiple times, if I make multiple requests to this page, it is not calling list posts multiple times, right? So it's just statically generated that page. Whereas if I switched that over to like async as the rendering mode there, presumably now when I keep refreshing the page, it's going to keep calling that server function. It's going to keep hitting the server. It's going to keep hitting the file system for that post data. So let's just give it a second and try that out. And you can see during the build process, it's deleted this old index.html. And now when it runs, it still created target site. It created about, and it created the post folder, but it didn't create the index page. And so now when we load this, you see every time I refresh, it's calling list posts. It's reading from the file system. So that's what we don't want, right? So we're going to go into static here. We saved that. Let's just run it again. And, you know, just to double, triple check that we're actually serving that static index.html page, we can do something like once this is built in a second and it's running, we can actually edit the index.html that appears here and see whether it's serving our edited version, which it should be. So if we go to the index.html and we just edit this, welcome to my edited page. This is why you shouldn't ever tempt the demo gods. That's interesting. All right, whatever. So that I have to look and see why it's doing it, but that's fine. But so then we have this static routing, right? And you can see on the post page, we can also provide certain params to be pre-rendered. So that's what's happening during that generation. So here we provided slugs, and this is an async function because it's going to run when we call this initial generation page method rather, and we await that. It's going to get this list of params. So it actually does this by calling another server function, which reads from the file system. And that will pre-render certain files. So it's going to pre-render whatever files are in that posts directory into blog posts. But then, of course, like we also, if we're actually running a server, we don't want to leave only the posts that we had there. We want to be able to edit posts. We want to be able to add posts. And so there's this second regenerate that we can add, right? Which tells us when the server should regenerate any given static file based on those params. So in this case, right, in the static routes one, the homepage one rather, we say that we want to regenerate it whenever, and then I have this watch path on posts. And watch path isn't even a server function. it just is configured out for SSR only. But this regenerate function returns a stream that doesn't have any, the item type is a empty tuple, unit type. So it's just a stream that's going to say, hey, whenever I should regenerate, I'm going to emit something to this. So you could do a stream that was like if you had some timer create stream timer new standard time duration from seconds 30, right? So say this was some crate that gave you an async stream that emitted something every 30 seconds, right? You could just return this and it would regenerate every 30 seconds whenever that went off. Here I'm using the notify crate with a file watcher and then just notifying through a channel, right? An async channel that we created here, whenever a file in this path that we've given it changes. So what that means in this case is that whenever this posts directory changes, we're going to regenerate these files. And what that should hopefully mean is that when we run this, it will initially generate this file, and we didn't provide pre-rendered params here because this page doesn't have any params, but it will just initially run the home page once. So we should see calling list posts once, right? We've got our page. And then if I go in here and say I just delete post 4, you can see when I deleted post 4, it called list posts again. So without requesting the page again, it regenerated the page because our file watcher down here was listening to posts and said, oh, okay, it changed. Something changed in here, regenerate. So it regenerated the page. And when I reload, it's the new page. And likewise, in this example, we have the same thing set up for the actual posts. So let's say, right, so you see reading post 1 dot markdown. So if I go to post 1 and I reload on it a bunch of times, it's only reading that file once. And then if I go in here, let's see if it gets the new content. You can see here now it has read post 1 again, and it's called list posts again, right? Because remember the homepage was listening to all of the files in that directory because it reads them to get the titles. And so now if I refresh here, it has the new content, but it still isn't fetching that content every single time we refresh. It's just fetching it when we've told it to regenerate, which is when this stream emits an item, which is when that file changes. And you can see that, it needs to regenerate the homepage too, because my first blog post, right? So if we go back in here and we say my first blog post is the best one, this will regenerate both the post 1 page and the homepage. Oh, and you know what? Did I just totally yeah, I was editing the title before. So let's go to my great blog is really serving static files. Let's see if this works a little better than that one did. Yeah, okay. So I was just editing it in the title, and then I was sad because it wasn't appearing in H1 because I'm a doofus. So you can see, it genuinely is just serving us directly this static file. It's not hitting the file system every single time. So for something like Alex's use case, right, for Housekey or other pages, even somebody's blog, right, if you have files that that basically don't need to be rendered in response to every single request, but can be rendered either once up front when the server starts up, or can be rendered once a day, and you just have a stream, right, that wakes back up once a day. And that's not a polling thing. That's a Rust async push-pull stream. So it does no work except when it wakes back up. Or if you have something that can be a file system watcher or database watcher, this regeneration is a feature we have not had before. And it's really, really useful because if you're running a server, obviously you want to say, well, when I actually add a new blog post, do the thing. And then if you just wanted to use this, right, for static site generation, like say you need to export something to GitHub Pages. And of course, I'm going to do my sort of go back to sharing my screen unnecessarily. Here we go. You can do exactly that. And it's set up so that you'll notice I included trailing slashes, my least favorite topic. I included a slash at the end of, let's include a slash at the end of the routes. The routes here. So when you do that, it's actually going to put it into a folder within index.html. And let's see, if I go into my main.rs and I actually remove Axum from it, so if I just take out the file server, I mean, take out the web server entirely. And if I run this still with cargo leptos serve, because that will at least build and then it will run the executable. So when it runs, instead of running the server, it's going to generate this set of static routes. It's going to send me a bunch of panicked messages that I don't know why. I have not tried this before. So let's see if it works. Oh, that's a bummer. No, it didn't work. Okay, well, let's just do it this way. Let's still have it run our server. I'm not sure why that panicked. Oops. So this is something that like is a matter of fixing this, but it's intended to work. Okay, so great. It's built our site. We've got everything in here. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to actually turn off the server and I'm going to cd into target site and I'm going to run a static file server. So we're going to switch ports over here, right? Because now it's on 8080. Sweet. Oh. Well, that's funny. Oh, because this is calling server functions, but there's no server running, right? Okay. So the hydrated part of it is calling these server functions, but the server functions don't exist. We almost need to like turn off client-side routing for this in an interesting way. So, but you can see, right, if I'm not trying to call the server functions and I'm just loading post 1, post 2, it does work. So if we turn off client-side routing here, then we can maybe get it to actually work entirely. Do I have some A tags? A rel equals external. It might just be those, yeah, those two. All right, humor me. And people start thinking of questions because I'm near the end of my time here. So if you have any questions, throw them in the chat, whatever. I'll answer whatever questions we have, and then I think we'll be done for today. After this one last little bit. But so like if you're trying to, just generate a static HTML site, right? The idea here is once I've done this and I kill this server, I'm not running a Rust server now. Whoops. I'm not running a Rust server. I'm just running this, Python simple file server, but this could be any static site that you're deploying to. Yay. And we just have a working app. The one other thing that I'm just proud of with this all is I did find a good way to make it preserve the headers and the status codes for things. So the server example will do this when it's actually running the Axum server. The just building static files one won't. But with this redirect, for example, it will preserve the fact that this needs a redirect header, and it will generate a static page for the redirect. And then it will, when it tries to serve that one, it will add the appropriate headers. So you can actually do things like add whatever headers to the response you want. Those headers for the response will be cached and will be regenerated at the same time as the actual HTML. So you can do the incremental static regeneration thing, not just with the HTML content of pages, but actually with the entire response. So like the response options that you would use in the integration get cached and sent along with it. Anyway, so that's what I've got on the static regeneration stuff, and I think that's what I've got content-wise today. So hit me with questions, and then we can call it.
All right. I think so far we only have one, but it is kind of I don't know. If this was the last question for this meetup, I think it would be a good last question. So,
Awesome.
lucky number Kevin, which is a cool name. I like that. Per your mention of oh no, wait, I'm sorry, wrong. That's a comment of almost the exact same link. Here we go. Ifyon asks, Greg, slightly deeper question here. I saw you mention before about long-term sustainability for the Leptos project and how to organize funding. Did you make any progress on this? I personally think this is a really interesting question. I think that like SurrealDB has been they've talked a lot about this. Another Rust project. A lot on like many different podcasts. InfluxDB. I was actually one of the engineers from Influx. They're doing a rewrite in Rust. And I was just an episode of Rustation Station just came out a couple days ago, or maybe it was like today or something. I don't know. I was listening to that, and this is something they were talking about. So I think this is like just generally an open source. This is kind of like just a generally hot question right now. So it'll be interesting to hear your response to this, Greg.
Totally. Yeah. So yeah, this is something I think about. So I want to frame it really carefully. That's not something I'm actively working towards some goal. So as far as progress, the answer is, no. I have lots of thoughts about it, and I'll share some of those thoughts. So I will say everything that we have to this point, the way that my configuration of work is, I'm able to work on this in what's essentially my free time and always has been, and that has replaced, as things like sponsorships have grown a little bit, has replaced some time I would be doing contracting work otherwise. So basically, I have some dedicated time that's funded by very generous GitHub sponsors and stuff when I can keep working on maintenance. And sometimes my maintenance load is less, and sometimes it's more, and sometimes we're trying to get a big release and rewrite out, and it's more, and other times I've had less going on. And I think after this release cycle, I'll probably step back just a little bit in terms of, number of commits and stuff, because we'll have gotten there right to the goal. But I actually, open source libraries and funding are an interesting thing. I think there's pretty much one good model, which is Vue, where the Vue has been successful enough, and the Vue community has grown enough, and there are enough people involved in using it in business that, Evan Yu kind of works on that full time as his thing, but not beholden to really anybody else. It really is a community project that people fund one person to work on. There may be more. I don't know the situation that well. I think it's important to be really careful in open source not to chase funding opportunities that aren't sustainable. And I don't think we've seen independent kind of web framework projects that have managed to navigate that entirely well. Like on the one hand, we have corporate funded big frameworks that are successful and good to use, React, Angular, but where ultimately the people who work on those things are employed by primarily Google or primarily Meta or somebody else, right? And ultimately they're corporate projects that are shared with you that are open source projects. That's not what this is. There are a lot of people who've tried to get venture capital type funding for open source projects. I have been approached about that in the past. I am extremely hesitant about that. And the main reason I'm very hesitant about any kind of funding or business monetization of the framework, right, is that the question is you get some funding, and then eventually within a certain amount of time, the people who fund you come looking for returns on their money, which is reasonable. And you have to have monetized something. And the question to me with an open source library is, well, who are your customers that you're trying to sell something to? Is it the users of the library and the community around the library who have contributed things and so on, right? At a point, this is not mine to do that with. We have had 279 contributors. That's just in the main repository, right? And I'm not here to make money off of all your work, and I'm not here to charge all of you anything. So for me, the current model, and just because of other circumstances in my life, honestly, I'm not looking to go full-time working on this. So the current model works pretty well for me and is pretty sustainable for me. People's priorities change. What people want to work on changes. I don't know if in 10 years I'm still going to be working on Leptos or whatever. But one of my goals is to make things pretty sustainable the way that we are, so that we're not in a situation where a few years down the road, oh no, we had funding, we're losing the funding, or where, like what happened to Elm a few years ago. If anyone knows Elm, if you don't know Elm and you're relatively new to web development, Elm is a programming language in front-end framework that was created like 10 years ago by a guy named Evan. And Evan got hired by a company that was using Elm in production to work on Elm full-time. And then the people who funded the company that Evan was hired at came looking for their returns and said, who's this guy who you are pay full-time software engineering salary to work on a compiler that's open source? And he lost his job. And that's not a great model either, right? So like, I'm happy that I'm not employed full-time by somebody else working on this. I'm happy that I'm not trying to monetize it. I'm happy that it isn't owned by a corporation. And I'm pretty happy with the current arrangements. So, around the margins, yeah, like if there were companies using it that wanted to, I know GitHub sponsors and company things can be hard. Open Collective, I think, is easier, and we can maybe look into that at some point. If there are companies that want to throw a few $1,000s our way, like, yeah, that will allow me to spend a little bit more time that I would otherwise be doing contracting stuff, working on Leptos. But ultimately, this kind of a model feels good to me. I guess to the extent that it doesn't feel good to anyone else, I can't speak to that. But this is kind of the level of involvement and energy and capacity that I have. And so if there are places where we need to scale things up, there may be other ways to do that. But this is pretty sustainable for me. It's been, we're coming up on 2 years since the first release, but it's been a little more than 2 years that I've been working on it. And, I don't really plan to go anywhere. And I think things have only grown and stabilized as far as community and kind of infrastructure. Having the meetups this last year has been great. Having been doing a lot of work on reading PRs and reviewing things and doing a ton of work on Cargo Leptos recently, and out there doing talks and in the community has been great. And like, everybody's invited, like anyone is welcome to get involved in this stuff. This is not a company or a selective organization. Just come and get involved. So yeah, I think that's what I have to say on that.
Cool, man. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say, man, Leptos is like just a good vibes community, I have to say. I mean, I'm doing like, I can say for me personally as well, like I'm doing helping with the meetups just for fun, basically.
Yeah.
And to surround myself with engineers that are much better than me. You know what I mean? So from people that I can learn from. And I mean, in what other situation would I be able to like get on an hour-long call with somebody like Greg? I mean, that's awesome. You know what I mean? So really, yeah. So yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe we get a 500 more YouTube subscribers and we get a few hundred, a couple thousand watch hours, and we can start getting some like super chats or something. But I don't know,
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, but ultimately, right, it's great, right? Like, I don't know. I guess eventually, right, we can, maybe if we do start getting some funding for stuff, maybe we can have little grants for contributors working on projects or ecosystem things or whatever. But I don't know. It's a good place to be. And it's a fun community.
Yeah.
And yes, absolutely. Good vibes is the number one goal, right? So I think I'll just say, I want to reiterate something I think I've said before and in general, but like, we are not in a framework flame war thing. We are just like, the thing that I want most out of this community is what I love about so much of the Rust community really is just like, people are generally positive and generally helpful and generally not bickering with each other and competing about my thing's better than your thing, but just like good vibes. That's what we're going for. So I'm glad you say that.
Yep.
And
Sure.
seriously, if anyone's at RustConf, come say hi. If you're not at RustConf, watch Chris's talk definitely, and anything else you can catch online, because it'd be awesome to meet anybody in person who is there.
For sure. Also, there's volunteer opportunities as well. If even I'm volunteering, like as online digital. I don't know. I got an invite. I finally got an invite to their Discord server, so I have to go get assigned a role. I just signed up to volunteer for the online aspect of it. So I know there's volunteer opportunities there as well. If anybody wants to,
Oh, that's
I'm sure
awesome.
you can probably get a free online pass or something to some talks as well. So
awesome.
Yeah. So cool. Well, then I guess that's it for this month. The next one, I always do this every week. I don't look at the date of the next meetup, and then I scramble at the end of the stream trying to find it. So it's going to be September 28th, Saturday, September 28th. So hopefully this time works for everybody. I've since relocated. I'm in Australia now, so this is like midnight for me. This is like the best I can do. It's either like midnight or like 5 in the morning,
Right.
But then the Europeans are like, it's like late for them. I don't know. So it's like, I'll bite the bullet. The Americans and the Europeans can have the good time zones, and I'll stay up late. So yeah.
Well, thanks for being here with us, and I hope you have a nice sleep.
Yeah, for sure. All right, cool. So September 28th, noon ET. We'll see everybody then.
Awesome. Take it easy.
All right, bye.